When two guards tried to move a black Marine from his son's graduation, no one expected 6 Navy SEALs to rise from the crowd and stop the entire room without saying a word. Solomon Drayton didn't expect anyone to recognize him when he pulled into the parking lot behind Elmridge High. The building looked like most high schools in smaller Texas towns: weathered red brick, a few flags fluttering over the entrance, kids loitering near the gym doors. It was already crowded. Parents in dress shirts, siblings holding signs, a grandmother leaning on a walker. It was all there. He parked his Dodge Charger near the chain-link fence and stepped out, smoothing the lines of his deep blue Marine uniform. His boots were polished to a mirror shine, not because he was trying to show off, but because there were things he didn't know how to do halfway. He looked around. His posture stood out, upright and firm. His face, though calm, carried the stillness of someone who had seen life from too many angles. He had driven 8 hours from Temple to make it to his son's high school graduation. He could have flown, but the Charger was his wife's favorite car, and even after her passing 2 years ago, he still felt closer to her on the road. Solomon opened the car door and pulled out a small photograph from the glove compartment. It was old and worn, with a slight tear in the corner, his wife holding Tyron when he was just a baby. He slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "I promised you," he said softly. "I wouldn't miss it." The walk to the entrance was slow and intentional. Every step carried meaning. His chest filled with something he didn't have a name for, but it lived somewhere between pride and ache. Inside, the gym was packed. Metal chairs filled the floor, bleachers already overflowing. The air smelled faintly of concession popcorn and floor wax. It was noisy, chaotic, alive. Solomon showed his printed ticket to a volunteer near the door, a short man with a clipboard and headset. The man squinted at it, nodded quickly, and pointed toward the 3rd row on the left side. "You're good to go. Family seating, up front." "Appreciate it," Solomon said, his voice steady. He made his way to the row, catching glimpses of other families as he passed. Some folks looked at him, did a double take at the uniform, then turned away like they hadn't. One woman gave him a small smile, then whispered something to the man beside her. Solomon didn't react. He'd been black, tall, and in uniform for a long time. He knew what some looks meant and what others didn't. He found his seat and sat down. The chair was plastic, slightly wobbly. He adjusted it without complaint. In front of him, the stage was set. Banners hung across the gym wall, Class of 2024 in big silver letters. A few school board members stood near the podium, checking notes. Solomon glanced at the rows of students lined up at the far end of the gym. Tyron was somewhere in the middle, tall, lanky, with his mother's eyes. 18 years gone just like that. He remembered holding him the night he was born, still in uniform, dirt still under his fingernails. He'd flown in from Okinawa with only 4 days leave, and now, here they were. He sat still, barely blinking, soaking in the moment. Behind him, people continued filing in. Chairs scraped, programs rustled, someone laughed too loud. A man dropped his coffee and muttered under his breath. None of it touched Solomon. His world was narrowed to the stage, the rows of young faces and the weight of the photo against his chest. Then the music started. Pomp and circumstance. And the crowd rose to their feet. A few students looked nervous, others beamed. Solomon stood too, shoulders squared, arms at his sides. The national anthem followed. Everyone placed hands over hearts. Solomon didn't move. He didn't need to. His whole presence was a salute. He thought of his wife again, how she would have cried through the whole ceremony, how she would have fixed Tyron's tie 3 times before letting him leave the house. His eyes stayed forward. But as the last note of the anthem faded, 2 uniformed men began walking down the side aisle, and they were heading straight for him. The 2 security guards moved with purpose. They weren't police. Their badges read Harlan Security Services, and their uniforms were standard. Black polo shirts tucked into cargo pants, earpieces, radios on their belts. Neither of them looked older than 30. One was short and wide-shouldered, with a shaved head and a tight expression. The other was taller, lanky, and chewing gum like he had somewhere better to be. Solomon noticed them right away, but didn't flinch. His training taught him long ago that stillness was often more commanding than movement. He kept his eyes forward, his hands resting loosely on his thighs. The shorter guard stopped beside him and leaned down just enough to be heard. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a low voice. "We're gonna need you to come with us." Solomon slowly turned his head. "Is there a problem?" The tall one stepped forward. "Yeah, this section's for families of graduating seniors." Solomon blinked, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same printed ticket he'd shown at the door. "This is my seat. 3rd row, left side. Family seating." "Confirmed." The shorter guard didn't even look at the ticket. "We got told it's full." Solomon didn't move. "It was full when I sat down too. You want to tell me who gave that order?" The tall guard shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't expecting a calm, clear voice. "Look, it's not a big deal. There's some extra seats in the back. Let's not make this anything it doesn't have to be." Solomon's eyes narrowed slightly. Not with anger, just quiet calculation. "I drove 8 hours to watch my son walk across that stage. I'll be sitting right here." A few heads had started turning. A woman 2 rows over nudged her husband and nodded toward them. Someone in the bleachers tilted their phone slightly, maybe recording. The short guard straightened up and looked around. "Sir, I'm going to ask one more time." "You can ask all day," Solomon said, his voice lower now, firmer. "I'm not moving." The tall one sucked his teeth. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable in the back. That's all we're saying." And there it was. Solomon looked at him fully now. That phrase wasn't about logistics. It wasn't about policy. It was about something older, something quieter, something that had followed him all his life in boardrooms, waiting rooms, front porches, and even the base cafeteria, just behind a smile, just under a whisper. He didn't respond. The air shifted around them, the way it does when people start sensing a line has been crossed. The short guard noticed it too. He adjusted the radio on his hip and muttered something into the mic, never breaking eye contact. Solomon stayed seated, staring forward like the conversation had ended, because for him, it had. A woman seated beside him, older and pale-skinned, leaned slightly toward him and whispered, "Don't you let them move you." He nodded once, acknowledging her but saying nothing. He didn't want to make a scene. He wanted to watch his son graduate like any other father, but the guards weren't finished. The tall one lowered his voice again. "Look, you got a problem. Take it up with the school office. We got our orders." Solomon turned his head toward him once more. "You have a name, son?" The guard blinked. "It's Officer Malley." "Not officer," Solomon replied. "You're private security." The other one stepped in. "All right, that's enough. If you don't stand up—" He didn't finish the sentence, because that's when the gym door at the far end clicked open, and 6 men walked in. No uniforms, no badges, just firm postures, squared shoulders, and faces that said they'd been through worse things than awkward stares and misjudged instructions. They didn't walk in together. They filtered in, one by one, taking different spots, like they weren't there together. But anyone watching closely could tell. They moved the same, watched the room the same, sat the same. Still, steady and alert. Solomon didn't look back. He didn't have to. He knew exactly who they were, but the guards didn't, at least not yet. And they were about to find out. Solomon kept his focus on the stage. His jaw didn't move, but his mind was turning. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But something inside him clicked into place, like a switch he didn't use unless he had to. The one built for survival, for balance, for patience under pressure. The 2 guards didn't leave. They hovered. It was the kind of hovering that wasn't about doing a job. It was about trying to remind someone they had power. But what they didn't understand was that Solomon had lived in places where power was life or death, not some gym with folding chairs and a sound system. A student name was called from the stage, and the crowd clapped politely. But people weren't really paying attention to the ceremony anymore, not the ones nearby. They were watching the standoff, pretending not to. The taller guard, Malley, shifted his stance again. He leaned closer, voice quieter this time. "I'm trying to do you a favor here, all right? This doesn't need to get ugly. Solomon's eyes flicked to him. You don't have that kind of favor to offer. A pause. Mally drew back slightly, as if reconsidering his next move. But the shorter one, Garvin, according to his badge, was less subtle. He didn't like being challenged. His hand hovered near the radio again. A few rows behind, a man stood up slowly. Nobody noticed at first. He didn't say a word, just crossed his arms and stared. Clean-shaven, broad frame, eyes sharp. He took a seat near the aisle without removing his gaze from the scene in front of him. A second man stood up on the opposite side of the gym. Same posture, calm, intentional. Then a third. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Solomon knew them all. He didn't turn to look because his instincts didn't require confirmation. He had led these men through mud, gunfire, and silence darker than most people could imagine. Garvin leaned down again, this time with something in his voice that wasn't there before. Listen, man, you're making this into a situation. Solomon turned his head, slowly and deliberately. And you're not listening. Garvin's hand twitched toward the radio again, but before he could say a word, a voice broke the tension from 10 feet away. Is there a reason this man's being bothered? It was clear. Calm. Controlled. The kind of voice that doesn't rise to get attention. It drops just enough to make everyone else stop talking. It came from a man standing in the center aisle. Tall, salt and pepper beard, fitted black coat over a grey shirt. His name was Creed Marston. He was the one Solomon had pulled from the wreckage in Kandahar, dragging him across 200 yards of sand while bullets rained down like gravel. Garvin looked up, caught off guard. Who are you? Creed didn't answer. He stepped forward once. I asked you a question. Mally raised a hand. Sir, we've got this under control. No, Creed said, sharper now. You don't. Another man stood up from the far bleachers. Then another. 4 of them now. Solomon remained seated, still quiet. The entire left side of the gym was now watching openly. A boy pointed. A teacher tried to wave attention back to the stage, but nobody was looking at the diplomas anymore. Creed took one more step forward. You're embarrassing yourselves, and you're one breath away from making this worse. Garvin glanced at Mally, who looked less confident by the second. It was clear now. They hadn't expected backup. Especially not backup like this. I don't care what your orders were, Creed said. You don't put your hands on that man. You don't tell him to move. You don't ask again. The silence in the gym felt tight. The kind that didn't come from fear, but respect. A quiet respect that started to swell as more people realized what was happening. Solomon finally looked up at Creed and gave the smallest nod. Not a thank you. Not a request. Just recognition. Creed's eyes softened for a moment. Then he stepped back and took his seat again, arms folded. But the tension hadn't left the air. Not yet. And the people watching were waiting to see what the guards would do next. The gym faded. The stage, the banners, the faces all blurred into the background of Solomon's mind. His eyes were still open, but his memory yanked him backward. 15 years ago, Afghanistan. It was late afternoon in Kandahar province. The sun didn't set gently there. It crashed down like a hammer, turning the sand to rust and the air to steel. Solomon, a gunnery sergeant back then, had just finished briefing his unit when everything went sideways. A roadside IED blew under their convoy, flipping the lead Humvee like a toy. Dirt and metal rained down before anyone could scream. Then came the gunfire. Not scattered. Coordinated. Solomon didn't think. He moved. He ducked behind what was left of a door frame, surveying the chaos. Smoke clouded the edge of the valley, but he saw 6 men down, trapped behind the burning wreckage of a second vehicle. Most were pinned. One was already trying to crawl forward, dragging another by the vest. That was Creed Marston. He had just 3 months in country and a bullet through his thigh. Solomon bolted. No hesitation, no radio call. He ran through open ground, dodging bursts of gunfire, sliding into cover behind a blown axle. Creed looked up, blood on his temple, gasping. You're bleeding, Solomon had said. You noticed? Creed coughed. Solomon grabbed the straps of the downed soldier beside him, Enrique Soto, and began pulling. Creed pushed from behind, wincing with every inch. "Where's Divas?" Solomon shouted. Creed pointed weakly. "Left side, under the hood." That's when Solomon saw him. A young seal pinned under part of the engine block, leg trapped. He was yelling for help, but too far gone to move. Without pausing, Solomon told Creed, "You keep low and move when I move." Creed nodded. That's when he really started to understand what leadership looked like. Solomon sprinted across again. His foot hit gravel, then bone, but he didn't stop. He slid to Divas, crouched low, and gripped the edge of the mangled hood with both hands. It wouldn't budge. "Gunny, don't!" Divas shouted. I'm good. You're not staying here." Solomon braced one foot, dug deep, and lifted. His shoulders strained, his ribs ached. The metal groaned, but it rose, just enough for Divas to yank his leg free. They fell back together, crawling toward the ridgeline. Gunfire cracked overhead. Creed returned with Soto limping on his good leg. 2 others followed. Lim and Horton, faces blackened with ash, rifles at the ready. When the firing stopped, there were no cheers, no victory speech, just silence and breathing. All 6 of them were alive. Solomon was the last to check out. He stayed on rear watch until the dust settled and the medevac arrived. He didn't speak for a long time after that. But Creed remembered. They all did. After that day, there was never a doubt. If Solomon asked for anything, anywhere, anytime, they'd be there. No matter what. Back in the gym, Creed sat quietly in his chair, eyes fixed on the guards still standing near Solomon. He wasn't thinking about war. He was thinking about promises. The man who had dragged him out of a war zone was now being harassed in front of a high school stage for trying to watch his son graduate. He clenched his fists. Another SEAL, Javier Meeks, walked in and sat 4 rows back. Then Zachary Wells found a spot along the right side bleachers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Solomon glanced toward the back of the gym now, just briefly. His eyes met Meeks. That was enough. But the guards didn't understand what those looks meant. Not yet. And the moment they made the next move, they'd learn real fast. The ceremony pressed on, at least on the surface. Names were still being called. Families clapped, some too loudly, trying to cover up the tension that now thickened the air. But the attention had shifted. Eyes that had once been glued to the stage